Okay, so Pia, hi, so nice to have you here. You are one of our amazing partners from Finland in our mission to collect 1 million signatures for safe and accessible abortion throughout all the Europe. We actually decided to do something crazy, to do the biggest European campaign ever, and collect 1 million signatures to actually protect abortion on European level. And my first question for you is, how do you feel like in this campaign? What are your expectations, and basically why are you here with us?
Thank you so much for inviting us to participate in this fantastic citizens initiative. So I represent Women's Association Unioni, which is one of the oldest women's associations or women's rights organizations in Finland. And we have been campaigning for women's rights for over 100 years, so actually longer than the Finnish state has actually been in existence. And so of course, this was something that we kind of jumped immediately to the chance of working together with our European colleagues, because abortion rights is such an integral part of women's rights and bodily autonomy, and we actually have a little bit experience in working with this and campaigning for this subject, because we just few years ago in Finland in 2020 successfully campaigned for new abortion legislation. And in a way, we felt that this was a chance then to kind of take what we have learned from that national campaign and work towards like abortion solidarity and safe abortion rights across Europe. So we're very excited to be part of this initiative.
Yeah, so you mentioned some of the most interesting stuff about your organization, which is like how old you are and like what are all the amazing things that you did. Can you explain a little bit more about Unioni and like some of your most important fights through the history?
Yeah, sure. So, like I told you, Unioni was founded already in 1892, and that was still a time when Finland was part of Russia, and it was not independent country, and there was no there was not an uh, really equal participation in political processes or anything. There was the right to vote, for example, was only for very kind of few men in like upper social status, and women did not have the right, for example, to educate themselves like in a university. Like still, if they wanted to apply for a university, the right to study in a university, they needed to apply kind of like a um, exception from their gender, so to speak. So of course, like Unioni has was created in a very different time, and in a lot of ways, Unioni has been very integral part of Finnish like the history of Finnish state and Finnish democracy, because one of the first and most crucial things that Unioni wanted to fight for was that was for like a right for women to vote and participate in parliamentary processes, and it was actually very successful. So that when in 1906 the right to vote was established in Finland, in Finnish Parliament, or this like new Parliament. It wasn't actually even a question, really. Like it wasn't really a like fight at that point. Like should women vote? Because the lobbying had been so successful, and actually in 2007, first MPs, women MPs in the world, I think, were actually Finnish MPs that were women MPs were selected, and two of them were already our members. And then throughout the decades, we've campaigned especially for women's right to like educate themselves, to work, and for equal marriage. and for equal shared care responsibilities. And we've had a lot of like victories, like really on legislative level. Like Unioni has really been there in a lot of these fights. Like for example, in like in from like 1920s to 1980s, really when like marriage equality uh, was uh, was established in law, for example, that like women had the right for their own property. In 1980s, it became like easier to get a divorce, and then in 1917, Finland was Union was also part of, and pre 1917 Finland. Union was part of advocating for marriage equality also for LGBTQ plus people. And yeah, so we've really been there through a lot of these issues, and we're still very much dedicated to that. I think at the moment one of our biggest kind of themes are especially care and kind of the care responsibilities and family leaves, those kind of things, and then gender-based violence. Yeah, so those are kind of just a few of the things that we are very focused on. And yeah, and also early education, and this gender equality in early education is something that we've done for the past already over 10 years. um, yeah.
Like all of this is like sounding so impressive, but and also in some ways like quite easy, like when you're saying like all these victories, but like probably there was a lot of work behind every single thing that you managed to do. Like what are the biggest learnings from the fights of like people who were in the organization before you? Like is it a lot of effort? Like how important it is to be stubborn in those fights?
Hmm. Yeah, I think what's if something we can learn from like the long history of Union is also that these fights are long in a way, that it takes time, and it's a marathon and not a sprint when you're trying to change legislation, when you're trying to change attitudes. And it's not it and it's always something that you can't do alone. So I think, of course, in a way, like every activist generation and all the active members in any organization, in a way, like they have to of course find their own way. And there's Union is such an old organization that of course we've had these like different ways of doing in different eras. But I think something that we think is very important is that we understand that we can't make the change alone, that we need to work together with different collaborators. And sometimes it also means that we need to find those things that unite us, that it's not that we can't in a way just be focusing on our differences, but we need to also work, for example, across the political board to come together with all these different actors that have something in common with, like, for example, we also in Finland we work in the Coalition of Women's Association, which is where all the members of where all the political parties women's groups are also members. So that's, for example, for us is a important way of or an important part to have those discussions always across the political spectrum and try to find those things that we agree on, even if we can't agree on everything, because yeah, you need like collaboration to advance anything that you want to really advocate for.
Yeah, and this is actually like one of my favorite things about Unioni is that you are not closed in one social bubble, but you always try to like go out of it, like try to connect different political parties, different groups, things that like in maybe in other countries we would say, oh, this is impossible. So can you like maybe describe one of these fights where you came together for a common cause?
Yeah, so for example, I think a very good example is the abortion campaign that we did, like the right for abortion, or to renew the 50-year-old abortion legislation in Finland. So it was something that we knew that in order to be able to make that change, that we needed to have a broad spectrum of supporters. That was something that we couldn't do alone. Basically, the legislation if I'll tell a little bit about the kind of the background of this change, was that like when it was originally established, the legislation was actually pretty good in that sense that it guaranteed abortion in Finland, but it was a very, in a way, like heavy process because it was designed in the time when still like medical like a medical abortion with a abortion pill was not a possibility, but you actually needed to do a surgery. So there were all these like, you know, steps that you needed to jump through. You needed to see several doctors, and you actually needed to have some kind of reason for abortion, and then like the doctor needed to ask for that reason. And there was in a way like this like this possibility that doctor could also say that this is not a valid reason. Like in practice, you could get an abortion in Finland, but it was very much this like a old legislation that was not really serving anymore the needs of people who needed to have an abortion. So what we did was that we talked very broadly with all different political parties and recruited them behind this idea that this abortion legislation needed to be changed. And also, we also realized that it was not something that we could just, even though we are an old and respected organization in Finland, but it was still something that we feel like it's not enough that we say that we need to change this legislation, but we really collaborated with all different like NGOs and like doctors union, midwives union, all these different actors in social and social sphere where they could all kind of stand behind this initiative. And it was very important for us because of that to say that this was not something that we were driving, but it was something that we were all doing as a unanimous front. And of course, then it also meant having a lot of discussions with different organizations, and especially with different political parties, and also having like a lot of these discussions where you also had to really just debunk all these like wrong ideas of what we were trying to do, and really just kind of explain what was happening, kind of in a way like demystifying it and making it less kind of scary than it actually was. And it was a pros it was a like a it was something that we knew that we had to think very carefully and plan very carefully. So um, we actually ended up postponing the launch of the campaign from the original launch date, because we decided that we still needed more time to actually, in a way, like get all our ducks in a row. So yeah, we really believe that you need to have something very well planned if you want to have this kind of big change happen.
And like basically, if we stick with the abortion campaign that you had, and it was also like successful, if I'm not mistaken, it was happening between COVID, like the launch of the full
Yes.
signature collection. So everything was mostly online. The things was happening there. Can you describe a little bit like the campaign and who were like the voices who were supporting the campaign? You said midwives, experts, doctors. But I also know that there were a lot of influencers involved, like people from popular culture.
Yeah, I think like it, like as we know, like if we want to get anything to change, that we need to get people behind it, and like we in a way like need to get people excited about it. And that was also something that we realized, that because of COVID, like we couldn't really do any this kind of like old fashioned like canvassing and like collecting signatures on in events or on the streets or anything like that. But it was really, we had to focus on social media campaign, and we had to have like a very good social media presence, and good content that we would produce in social media. And yes, we had a lot of organizations, but of course it was really important to get people engaged. We were very lucky to have some influencers joining along, but actually like if I remember correctly, like in the end, like not that many. That it really, like it truly felt that it was something just that people were very like it kind of really started to spread. But I think it was very, our communication team was very strategic about that, like how like where to really like have these conversations, and like we really tried to ignite the fire. But I think we were very lucky in that sense, that I think this was something that in a way, like this also coincide very very well with the rise of, in general, like this interest in feminism, and especially in the younger generation. So it, like this kind of social media feminism has been like a huge thing in the past years, and it's a huge resource in a way, like for societal change, that we can really harness and come together together as a as a actors of change.
Mhm. And like one of the things that like you were speaking about a lot is like abortion as a healthcare, abortion as part of like
Mm.
taking care for ourselves. Can you like explain like how you were communicating about these issues? What were your main messages in the
Mm.
campaign?
Think for us, actually, like, one of the, like I said already before, that we kind of wanted to debunk these kind of myths and kind of these threats that people might have feel about this issue. And one of the reasons was that because we weren't actually trying, in our campaign, we weren't actually trying to change, for example, the time frame when a person could get an abortion or anything like that. So in a way, like, so we were very much in a way focusing on saying that we are not actually doing anything radical. That is not something that people are not already able to do, but we are making this process easier for women's, like, women, and like anyone who like needs for abortion, like for their mental health, to be able to get this procedure done quickly, and also that it wastes less resources from healthcare. And then but then definitely it was also like a big part of what the messaging was also, of course, this, that it is like a person's own right, like women's own right to choose for their own body. And I remember there was this, like, I wrote a piece about this campaign, actually, for our a feminist magazine that we published, called Tulva. And I interviewed the like the chair of the Midwives Society, who was also behind this campaign, and Katrina Biljuskin. And I thought she said something so like impactful, and something that really like stayed with me, actually, in like every decision really that I make. Like, because she said that whenever, like, she was talking a lot about that, how like, how in healthcare, in the old Finnish legislation, there was still this requirement that the healthcare professionals had to like ask the reason, like why is the person seeking for abortion. And all the doctors and midwives that were in the campaign, like, they were stressing that it's not really their decision to make, like, because it's not a medical decision, like whether you're going to have a child or not. Like, it's not something that anyone else than the person who is carrying that pregnancy should have any say. And then she told me that many people still, when they come to see her, who are pregnant and who are undecided what they should do, and then they ask her, like, what should I do, like, what would you do? And she told me, she said that I always tell them that I can never tell anyone else what they can do, but I always assure them that whatever decision they make, it's the right decision, because they made that decision based on all the information that they had in that moment, and with the feeling that they had in that moment. And that's why it is always going to be the right decision.
Yeah. A beautiful story and a beautiful point. One of the things that we have in Slovenia is that we have abortion written in the constitution. We were
Mm.
actually having this before Friends, but no one knew it. And in
Oh, I
our
didn't know that either. That's
yeah,
amazing.
it's amazing. And in our constitution, it is basically written that every person can freely decide about the birth of the kids, which means that like you need to have all the informations, as your midwife said, to basically
Mm.
decide about your own body. So I think it's a beautiful like story to basically tell that fight for abortion, it's not a fight for a rule, it's not a fight to forbid something, it's just a fight to make possible for all the people to make like informed decisions about themselves.
Exactly. But of course, it would be naive to say that, that even though, for example, the campaign that we did, in a way, like, we didn't even propose anything that radical, because, like said, we weren't trying to change, for example, the time frame when a person could get an abortion or anything like that. But of course, it would be naive to say, like naive to pretend that there wasn't any pushback, or that there wasn't, people who don't think that women have the right to their bodily autonomy. So of course, that is something that, in a way, like when you are advocating for this kind of change, this is just the reality that we live in, and it is difficult, especially because we are seeing that there is this huge rise of conservatism all over Europe, and like the anti-gender movement, which is really also like pushing back like not just gender diversity, but really truly like very basic rights of women, like for example like campaigning against the Istanbul Agreement and things like that. That it would be very naive to like to not to realize that we are truly like fighting against we are fighting against that kind of conservatism, right-wing movement that are truly there to limit the freedom of women, and we need to be very vigilant and on all fronts, and vehemently advocate for these rights, because as we know that from US, for example, that those rights that you once had, like they can be taken away from you. So also that's why I'm very happy to hear that you have the right to abortion in the constitution.
Yeah, and one of the fights which we are basically also having, and like one of the reasons
Mhm.
for this campaign is also to build like this international connected community that can stand up when they want to take a certain right away from us. But for me, also, like you mentioned something before, which is also giving me a lot of hope. You mentioned like new generations of like young girls fighting for their rights, like online and. Tell me more, like this is, we always like want to hear about like stories of hope, so what is giving hope to you?
Yeah, I think definitely like the younger generation is giving me hope. Although it is very interesting and in many ways very worrying that what we learned from research in recent research, like research published recently, that young men and women's like political views are kind of going in opposite directions, that women are becoming more and more liberal, and then like young men are becoming more and more conservative. So that is a very very like worrying trend, and something I think that we also as feminists, like we really need to be also worried about, and really think like how can we also make sure that everyone is like committed to equality for everyone. But definitely this new generation of young girls and women, who in a way like they think it's wonderful that so many of these younger girls, like they can't even imagine in a way like a world where they wouldn't have equal rights, or that this feels so like like it feels like such a no-brainer for them, and that really this kind of how would I say, this like certainty that they have, that of course they have the right to take space, and of course they have the right for their own bodies and their own pleasure and their own voice, like everything that really gives me so much hope.
Oh, sorry, someone just like rang a bell here in my
Mhm.
office.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
this is amazing. And also like if we just go now to the abortion campaign, like which we are doing in
Mm.
Europe, I know that like Finland and Slovenia are two countries where we have like a lot of things which are functioning, like in connection with abortion. We also have a huge number of people supporting this value. And one of the main reasons that we are doing this is also because of like support to Polish women, support to women in Malta. And like this moment of like this global solidarity, I think it's extremely important. Like, how are you seeing the situation in Poland? How are you commenting the fact that like in the European Union we have countries where you cannot do abortion?
yeah, I think it's just it's horrifying. If we think that this is our joint Europe, and I'm that old that I still remember when Finland became part of EU, but in a way, like, I've grown up in EU, kind of, and in many ways, like, reaping the benefits of EU as a, like, free travel, and and right of education in different EU countries and everything. Like, I love EU, and somehow it feels, it feels horrible that there is, in our, in our joint EU, there are still this kind of injustice, and inequality, and I feel like, as Europeans, like, we we have to, like, there is this imperative to be in solidarity with each other, and really truly move forward together with these issues. And it's something that we cannot, like, leave behind. And you mentioned a little bit also about this, like, creating the network, and I mentioned the anti-gender movement, and I watched the previous episodes of Bread and Roses, and I really loved what Alice Coffin was saying about, like, creating this network for years to come, because truly I think that, like, when it comes to women's rights, we are living in a time when we can't do our own things in isolation, but we truly need to come together and work together, because those forces that are opposing women's rights are also coming together and are also joining their forces. And also, as a, personal note, I at the moment, I actually live in Hong Kong, so I'm calling you from Hong Kong, where I do this work for Unioni remotely. But like, looking things in Europe from a little bit, like, different angle, from an Asian perspective, it is also, I truly also see that there is this, like, there is a danger that EU, in a way, loses relevance, I think, in a global stage. And I think one way that we can really truly, as Europe, maintain that relevance is to actually be the voice of democracy, of equality, of like, women's rights, and like, legal processes. So it is, like, I think that, at one way, right for abortion, it's such a personal uh, issue, but it also is such a huge global issue, and I think it's imperative that we are joining forces for this fight.
Yeah, I agree. And also, like, for me, one of the reasons why basically I decided to start this campaign is because I had similar experience to you. I was living in New York for 1 year,
Mm,
and just in the time when when they decided to in the court to basically forbid abortion on the level of
mm,
US. And for me, this distance was basically something which made me forced to start thinking how to build up things like in Europe, how to build up this huge momentum that we have. One thing that we always also speak about is like fighting with joy, fighting with glitters, fighting with like happiness. What is like the biggest, how to say, motivation for you to keep going what you're doing, to start every single campaign again and again until we change something?
I think, honestly, feminists are just, like, the best people. Like, they're the most, warm and caring and humorous and fun, and like, people. It's like, it's the best thing in the world to work with other feminists, and to really strive for change, like, from grassroots level all the way up to the societal level. Like, it's truly is, like, I think, like, feminism in itself is just so filled with joy and possibilities. Like, that truly gives me so much strength, and yeah, joy every single day. I
Yeah.
really don't see kind of like any other way to be, really.
Yes, same. And also, like, now you have a moment to say to the people, like, why they need to sign the ECI, why they need to give their own signature under the fight that we are having. When this will be published, we will already start collecting signatures, and we will be on our way to collect 1 million of them. So, like, what is your message to the people that are listening to us, and to the people that just need to take their pen and sign the thing?
Yeah, this is an issue that it's close to everyone. Like this, like a question of bodily autonomy, it's all of our issue, even if you would never personally need to have an abortion. But the right to make choices about your own body is something that should belong to every single person. And if we are starting to, if we are starting to take away those rights for some people, like we are really kind of digging the ground underneath us, and in a way, like, making it possible for all, like, other rights relating to bodily autonomy also to be denied from all of us. So that's why, even if it was your own country that the abortion legislation was already good, or like if you thought you never needed an abortion, like, still this is something that it really affects on all of us. So I really hope that we are, all of us, in one united front, making this change in Europe.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me from Hong Kong. I hope that we will meet in person one day, and till then, as we say in the Institute, we continue to fight and change the world together.
Yes, thank you so much, Nika, and we will continue the fight, and always we continue to do it joyously and relentlessly.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.